Hey guys, in this video I'll be taking you through the Assassin's Creed Shadows skill trees for both Naoe and Yasuke. I captured this from my hands-on with the game a few weeks back, and there are some incredible new moves here, as well as some cool new weapons like grappling hooks, katanas, 16th century firearms, and more. So before the game comes out on March 20th, you can already start to plan your build and look ahead to the most effective skills you'll want to grab. Now, Shadows does make a few changes to the formula, so here's how the skill system in the game works. Basically, you unlock new skills by leveling up your knowledge ranks. To level up your knowledge rank, you have to earn knowledge points, and these are given to you through a few different activities. These include doing missions, taking down outposts, praying at shrines, and meeting weapon masters, as you can see here, and doing their minigames. You then buy each skill on the skill tree using your knowledge points. The more powerful skills are locked until you increase your knowledge rank. So first I'll show you Naoe's skill tree, then after that I'll show you Yasuke's, which is a tiny bit different. So here's Naoe's skill tree. Like Yasuke, she has 6 distinct disciplines. 3 of these, the top 3, relate to her 3 unique weapons. These are the katana, kusarigama, and tanto. The bottom 3 relate to her style of gameplay, which are tools, shinobi, and assassin. We'll start with kusarigama mastery, and I'm going to be highlighting my favorite moves from what I saw and played with, and what I think will work well together, and basically just theory craft the most effective skills you'll need when the game comes out. Now, if you didn't know what a kusarigama is, it's Naoe's chain weapon. It's a traditional Japanese weapon that consists of a sickle on one side of the chain, weighted down with a heavy iron weight at the other end of the chain. The first rank of this increases damage by 7%. The next rank doubles that to 14%, and there are 8 ranks of this. So I see this adding 7 on each rank, up to a maximum of 56%. If it doubled each time instead, that number would be crazy. I can't even work it out, so let me know in the comments what that would be. But yeah, I think what this does is add 7% damage each time rather than doubling. Either way, you're going to get loads of damage out of this if you rank up your mastery. Feral Outburst. Launch Naoe towards a single enemy and unleash a flurry of 4 strikes, dealing 20% ability damage each. This skill plays into Naoe's incredible speed, letting you overwhelm enemies. Quick Strike. This is a passive skill for Naoe, and how to do it is after any attack, momentarily pause and then press R1 or R2 to launch 2 extra strikes. Entanglement. This is a passive, and the description for this is before hitting an enemy with a posture attack, hold down R1 or R2 to entangle them. Throw regular enemies in any direction using the left stick. This is of course with the kusarigama. So what this basically is a grab and throw attack. Naoe also has Big Catch. This is another passive, and the description for this is entanglement now has its full effect on large enemies. So before you could only entangle small enemies, but with this one you can literally entangle anyone no matter their size. And in this game there are loads of giant enemies, and they really do need taking down to size. Feral Frenzy. Now this is an add-on to the Feral Outburst, which we covered earlier, and Feral Outburst now unleashes 2 extra strikes. So it takes the attack from 4 strikes up to 6 strikes, which is effectively stun locking your opponents in place and doing damage. The requirement for this is knowledge rank 4, and you also have to progress further in the story to unlock this. So it is quite a kind of mid to late game move, and it's going to be really powerful. Cyclone Blast. This is going to be a staple of Naoe's attacks. This is where you swing the kusarigama in a large circle, dealing 8% ability damage and pushing back stuck enemies. Now I did this loads of times during my playthrough. It was amazing to use, and you could not only damage enemies all around you but also completely break apart the environment, and if there's any like crates or any fruit or watermelons in the vicinity, they will completely break apart, and it just feels amazing. An upgrade to this is Lasting Storm. This increases the Cyclone Blast duration. This requires knowledge rank 4, but it also can be upgraded 2 times, so you can keep that cyclone blowing for quite a while. Multi-target Expert. Increase damage when hitting multiple enemies by 5%. The next rank of this is increase damage when hitting multiple enemies by 10%, and there are 3 ranks of this, which leads me to think this will go up to 15% on the maximum rank. This is going to be really useful with the Kusarigama because the whole point of this weapon is to hit multiple enemies at once, and if you can do more damage when doing that, that's very good news. Tug of War. When pulling an enemy towards Naoe, perform a powerful attack that deals 50% ability damage and knocks them down. 50% extra damage is really useful, and anything for me above 15, 20, you can actually really feel it in the game. These skills and abilities that do 5% damage, you don't really feel that much. So it's really good to see an upgrade that gives you 50% extra, and you can notice the difference straight away. Okay, on to the katana, and Naoe is deadly with the katana. This is one of her main weapons, and firstly, what I recommend grabbing above anything else is the katana mastery. Again, this has 8 ranks, and the first rank increases the katana damage by 7%. The next rank increases damage by 14%, and each rank will add an extra 7% on top. So if we multiply 7 by 8, that results in 56. So 56% extra damage to your katana if you rank up fully in katana mastery. In other words, if you're looking at the enemy health bar as 100%, you'll knock off about a quarter of that with a fully upgraded katana, taking them down in less swings of your blade. In my experience playing the game, it only took a few swings of the blade anyway to take people down, and by that I mean the people on my current level, so reducing that number down even further, I can really see you being able to take out enemies in 1 or 2 swings, and that's going to feel absolutely deadly. I did venture into some different regions where there were really high level enemies, and they took 20, 30 swings of the blade, so this is not really going to come in handy for those guys, but yeah, the enemies on your level, you will just carve through them. Tidal Wave is one of the other abilities you're going to be using as Naoe. This is the katana again, and this is an extremely fast strike, dealing 25% ability damage and making the enemy vulnerable. What does vulnerable mean in this game? It's basically a status effect, and they'll go all wobbly, and they basically leave themselves open for an attack. So in other words, they're dazed and they're not going to be defending themselves. Dodge attack is a passive, and this sees you press R1 after a dodge to launch a fast counterattack and quickly get behind the enemy. In Assassin's Creed Shadows, you're always either blocking or dodging, so being able to attack straight away after a dodge is really handy. And I will say that Naoe dodges way more than Yasuke. Yasuke is more of a blocker, Naoe is more of a dodger, so the dodge attack is something you'll be relying on heavily, which is why I suggest getting the dodge attack passive. Generator is an extra thing you can add on to the dodge attack, and the description for this is dodge attacks generate 25% of an adrenaline chunk on hit. Adrenaline is how you unleash your ultimate attacks. Adrenaline is how you unleash your abilities, like for instance the Tidal Wave, which I just mentioned. So anything that can build up that adrenaline is really useful. The next rank of this doesn't actually increase the amount of adrenaline you'll get, but it does increase the damage you'll do, and this ups it to 40% on rank 2. So not only are you getting more adrenaline when you use your dodge attacks, but you're also kind of almost doubling the damage to 40. Eviscerate is another Naoe ability. With this, you strike an enemy, dealing 75% ability damage and pushing them away, half as effective on large enemies. 75% damage, that is crazy. You're going to be carving through enemies with Eviscerate, which, kind of lives up to its name. As I mentioned, abilities, like in past Assassin's Creed games, do require adrenaline to use. But once you've got a full meter, you can unleash this move and take down most enemies in one go. Counterattack. Press L1 at the last moment to turn your deflect into a counterattack. So it's not just the Kusarigama that has the counterattacks, but also the katana, and they really rely on timing. Normally pressing L1 at the last moment deflects the attack and leaves your opponent vulnerable, but this one changes that move slightly and makes you deflect that and actually do damage at the same time. Second wave. Tidal Wave can now be chained 2 times in a row. The next rank of this is increase tidal wave damage by 40%. In other words, this basically lets you do 2 tidal waves in one go, which is really cool. 2 moves for the price of 1. Guard Breaker. Unleash 9 strikes on a single enemy, each dealing 10% ability damage and breaking armor. Half as effective on large enemies. This is a really big ability for Naoe, and as you can see, it costs 3 mastery points, so you might have to save up for this one. But it does seem worth it. I mean, 9 strikes on an enemy, that's going to take them down really, really quickly. And even if they're armored, Guard Breaker is going to totally nullify the armor and break it right off. So even if you don't take them down with Guard Breaker, they will be left naked without the armor and receive much more damage. Exposed Wound, a passive for Naoe, and this is when Feral Outburst's final strike makes the target vulnerable. So if you like Feral Outburst and you want to increase that ability even more, add this onto it and you'll make opponents vulnerable after you've finished that move. Then you can kind of chain into a different attack and do way more damage with whatever you decide to follow up with. Melee Expert. It doesn't come much more basic than this. What happens is you just increase your damage when you rank this up, and you increase it by 9%. There are 3 ranks of this, so 9, 18, 27. That's going to up your damage with melee weapons to 27%. Does exactly what it says. Nothing flashy about this, just upgrade your damage, but it does so across the board, so it's always going to be handy to be outputting more damage. Outclass. Eviscerate now has its full effect on large enemies. Onto Naoe's Tanto now, and the Tanto is basically her short blade or her dagger, which is the fastest weapon she has at her disposal. I didn't really like using this at first, but then I switched to it a bit later after getting some abilities, and it really does have a lot of hidden depth. You can strike about 5 times per second. It really is rapid, and be cutting up enemies before they even know what's hit them. Really, really fun to use, and with Naoe being the fastest Assassin's Creed protagonist, it honestly feels like you're superhuman at times when you're using the Tanto. And apologies, I wasn't able to actually capture any gameplay of this in action due to the time constraints I did have with the preview build I was playing, so apologies for that. Now, ability wise, you have Shadow Piercer, which I recommend getting first. This is an ability wherein you throw the Tanto, then dash forward to stab the target and make them vulnerable. This deals 40% ability damage with each strike. It's a little bit anime, like you wouldn't expect a regular human to be actually able to move this fast, but hey, we'll suspend our disbelief just for a moment because it looks cool as hell. Leap Strike. While holding R1 or R2, press circle and a direction with the left stick to leap towards the target and strike. I actually wasn't able to try this out because I didn't really slot this in to my hotkeys, but I really wish I did because it sounds amazing. Literally jumping and striking at a target like that bit in Troy, you know, with Brad Pitt stabbing that guy. Actually, I think he stabbed Eric Bana, no disrespect. But what this brings to mind is all the different button combinations that are going to be in Shadows when you upgrade all of your skill trees. Like, there's going to be a lot of combinations to learn, but that's actually a good thing because I really love it when there's depth in combat. There's nothing worse than just learning all the moves in the first 5 hours and just repeating them over and over again. It really starts to get repetitive, so it's better to have a really exhaustive move list with loads of moves to learn than only 1 or 2. Backstab. Light posture attacks that hit an enemy's back trigger weak point attacks. This is going to tie in really well with stealth because stealth is the only time where you're actually going to get behind enemies. You're not going to try this in the midst of combat because they know you're there. So when you're stealthing through an enemy outpost, use Backstab and get those weak points. Invigorating Kill. Shadow Piercer generates 80% of an adrenaline chunk on kill. The next rank increases Shadow Piercer damage by 40%. So not only can you generate adrenaline with other weapons like we've seen, you can also generate adrenaline with your Tanto. Okay, onto the Shinobi skill tree for Naoe now, and the first thing I want to draw your eye to is the grappling hook. This is everything in Assassin's Creed Shadows. To use this, simply press R1 and you launch your grappling hook, then circle to drop, and you can also swing on it and move up and down, and then when you want to jump off, press X. You can have an ascension boost as well, where you climb faster on the grappling hook and rapidly get yourself up buildings. Heightened Senses is another key Shinobi ability. While undetected, time slows down around Naoe for 8 seconds and aborts on enemy contact. Lightning Kicks is an ability for Naoe in the Shinobi skill tree. You can knock down 2 closest enemies and deal 20% ability damage to each. An upgrade to this is Sweep the Leg, where Lightning Kicks can now perform 1 additional leg sweep on a nearby target that is not already knocked down. Quiet Knockout is a lethal stealth move where you knock out grabbed enemies and it basically performs it faster. I say lethal, it does leave them alive, but they might as well be dead. Hidden Blade, another classic assassin move, but you have to unlock it, so you press R1, you can assassinate regular enemies. You do have to upgrade this to the Reinforced Blade if you want to take down heavy enemies and large enemies like those big and massive tank people. Nightcrawler is a passive skill under the Assassin skill tree, and this is where you increase damage during the night by 4%. This goes to all the way up to rank 3, so you can increase damage even more during the night, and this really takes advantage of Assassin's Creed Shadow's day and night cycle. So if you want to do more damage to enemies, make sure it's the night, and then you can blitz your way through outposts. Rush Assassinate. Now this is one I didn't get to try out, but while using the Kurisagama, Naoe can close the distance and assassinate people with a unique takedown move. I really want to see what this is like, so this is one I need to unlock when I get the game. Onto the tool skill tree, and what tools you can have in this game. You can have kunai, which are like the throwing daggers, you can have shuriken, you can have smoke bombs, and a shinobi bell. On the upgraded tool bag, you can have 1+ kunai, 2+ shuriken, 1+ smoke bomb, and 2+ bells. What do the bells do? Well, the bells are sort of your distraction device. You throw these on the ground and they'll produce a little tingling sound, and enemies will come over and investigate. So it's sort of like the coin flip from previous Assassin's Creed games. You can actually upgrade the bell to have louder chimes. So the Shinobi bell has increased its radius by 5 meters. Triple Threat is an upgrade to your shuriken, so you can actually throw 3 at the same time for the cost of 1 shuriken. Upgrade this even more with Bank Shot, so you can now bounce the shuriken between targets. Smoke Bomb is another tool, so you can just aim with L2 and then press R1 to throw a smoke bomb, and this breaks all line of sight. Your kunai, your throwing knives, you hold L2 to aim and press R1 to throw, and this deals 400% damage. Headshots on unsuspecting enemies will remove 3 health segments. Armor Piercing is next, and this increases the damage of throwing knives by 50%. So this has 50% extra damage against armor. Move up the skill tree on the throwing knives and you get to Everlast. This means kunai can no longer break on hard impact and can be retrieved indefinitely, so you can keep on grabbing those kunai. Kunai Assassination damage 3. This is where Naoe removes 1 additional health segments with the kunai, and I really have to get used to calling them kunai rather than throwing knives. So that's it for Naoe. Let's move on to Yasuke, and this guy is a proper fighter. Not that Naoe isn't, but he's more of the specialized fighter archetype who you can rely on to bring the pain. And he has the long katana, naginata, kanebo, teppo, samurai, and bow skill trees. First up, Long Katana Mastery. This increases Long Katana damage by 7%. The next rank increases Long Katana damage by 14%. So basically what we saw with Naoe, you go up by 7 each time. What's the difference between a katana and a long katana? Well, it's exactly what you think it is. The long katana is just longer. It has a better range, but this comes at the expense of a tiny bit of speed. Next up for Yasuke, I recommend getting Armor Avoidance. This is a passive, so obviously you don't have to do anything, but Power Dash now has 100% Armor Piercing. So when you do your Power Dash, Armor will not defend the enemies at all and not negate any of that damage. Power Dash. This is Yasuke's signature ability. I did this loads of times over my playthrough, and what this is you dash to a single enemy, dealing 50% ability damage, then move behind them to make them vulnerable. It is a lightning fast attack and is a bit over the top, and the first time I pulled this off, it kind of took me out of the game a bit, but you get used to it. And I came to rely on this ability to finish off my enemies. You can increase the Power Dash further with Chained Power Dash. This is a passive, and Power Dash now can rush to a second enemy. So you do a Power Dash on one enemy, then you can chain that to a second enemy. It's like you're pinballing between them like Sonic the Hedgehog. This requires Knowledge rank 6, and you have to progress further in the story to actually unlock this, so it is a mid to late game ability. As you can imagine by that, it is really powerful. So by this time, you're going to be encountering really strong enemies and be using Power Dash a lot. Next up for Yasuke, it's Riposte. Release L1 right after blocking a hit to perform an immediate riposte. Now, if you didn't know what a riposte is, it's basically a counter attack. So you just use the right timing after blocking, and Yasuke will unleash a counter attack automatically. Really useful to have. Defensive Strike. Riposte now has a 100% critical chance when performed against a flurry attack. It's a bit of a specific use case for Defensive Strike. It's only going to come in when the opponent is using a flurry attack, and in my playthrough I didn't really experience many enemies who were using this specific attack. But if you do start to notice them using flurry attacks, which might happen later on in the game, then Defensive Strike is going to help you out there. Payback. Deal 3 powerful strikes to a single enemy, each dealing 35% ability damage and restoring 10% health. Overrun. Increase payback damage by 1% per 1% health missing. So if we times 35% by 3, that exceeds 100%, which means you can do over 100% damage to an enemy and completely knock them out of the game. You can increase that even further with Overrun. Overrun increases payback damage by 1% per 1% health missing. So you can imagine doing this when you're on really low health will maximize the effectiveness of payback. Something to use when you're nearing the end of your health bar and you're just like, okay, I really need a Hail Mary play. Use Payback with Overrun and you'll get yourself out of a sticky situation. Unstoppable is another payback ability. This one's a passive. Payback can no longer be blocked or parried, so there's no counter to this. There's nothing standing in your way. Enemies can't block payback. Whether they've got a shield, a full ensemble of armor, you can do damage. Sheath Posture. Sheathed attacks can now become a posture attack by holding R1 or R2. The next rank of this is increased sheathed attack damage by 20%. Sheathed attack. Hold L1 and press R1 or R2 to sheath the katana and launch a stronger strike that can break the target's guard. Essentially what this does is charge up your katana attack. So you might leave yourself a tiny bit vulnerable while you're charging, but to balance that out you actually get more damage when you unleash that attack. And it looks really cool as well, just holding your sword by your side, your hand gripped around the hilt, ready to spring into action. Samurai Showdown. This was a favourite of mine playing as Yasuke in my hands-on. And what this is you taunt up to 3 different enemies and attack them, dealing 15% ability damage to each. So 15, 30, 45. That's 45% spread across 3 enemies. And this is really cool. It reminds me of those old samurai movies where there's 3 people standing and they're having a face-off. You might also refer to this as a Mexican standoff, but you always come out of this the victor because you're the first person to move. That's just how the move works. And Yasuke will just go between each enemy and slash at them. Naoe can't do this. This is a Yasuke only ability, and I did this so many times. Really, really nice one, and I recommend getting it. Shatter. Increase Samurai Showdown armor damage by 50%. So to give this a bit of context, when I was playing as Yasuke, towards the end of my playthrough I started to encounter enemies with armor and my attacks weren't doing that much damage. With Shatter, you actually increase the damage done to armored enemies by 50%. And as you can see, I didn't actually upgrade this as you require knowledge rank 4, but if you did, it would make Samurai Showdown much more effective. Call of Honor. Samurai Showdown can now taunt up to 4 different enemies. This increases the range and the scope of Samurai Showdown. Now what taunt means in this scenario is you're attracting the enemy gaze. Yasuke doesn't actually taunt, like he's not out there trash talking his enemies. He just stands rooted to the spot and looks deep into their eyes. If there are 4 people in the vicinity, they'll be baited over to this stance and they'll also get damaged when you decide to unleash that move. Adrenaline boost. Sheathed attacks generate 50% of an adrenaline chunk on hits. So build up that adrenaline doing sheathed attacks and then you can reel off more abilities. Melee weapon armor damage. Increase armor damage with melee weapons by 6%. Not something that you're going to use in the early game of Assassin's Creed Shadows because most of the enemies are not armored, but towards the late game and as you get into those level 30 areas of the map, you will start to encounter more and more enemies with armor, and this is going to come into its own. So don't get this straight away. Get this when you're around, level 20 to 25. This also has 3 ranks, so if we rank up 6, 12, 18, that's going to do almost 20% extra damage to armored enemies. Moving on to Yasuke's Naginata. You can increase the Naginata damage by 3%, and this has a few ranks as well. This has several different ranks to increase that damage even further. The Naginata is basically a big pole with a blade on the end, and the closest thing I can kind of liken it to is a scythe. The main ability for the Naginata is the Crescent Strike. This is where you jump to an enemy and swing the Naginata in a large arc in front of you, dealing 25% ability damage and pushing them back. So when Naoe has the chain which can damage loads of enemies around her, for Yasuke, his way of dealing damage to multiple enemies in one go is the Naginata. Really good for group fights. Impale is another Yasuke ability with the Naginata. This is where you impale an enemy, dealing 15% ability damage and moving with them up to 13 meters. On release, they become vulnerable. And yeah, this is one of the more gory moves from Yasuke. You literally stick them on the end of your blade and run off with them. Whirlwind is a passive for Yasuke. Hold L1 and press R1, R2, R2, R1, R2 for a powerful combo dealing 5% more damage with each strike. This is one of the lengthier moves in the game, but you basically just keep this going with the shoulder buttons and swinging that Naginata around. Rising Storm. Whirlwind generates 10% of an adrenaline chunk on hit, increasing the effectiveness of the Whirlwind. Persistent Storm. After performing the first strike, press R1 or R2 in any order to keep the Whirlwind going. So as you go up the Whirlwind skill tree, you're going to make it more and more powerful. Piercing Momentum. Increase armor piercing with consecutive hits by 4%. Ultimate Onslaught. Onslaught can now no longer be blocked or parried. Again, another late game skill, this one, because you need knowledge rank 6 and you also need to progress further in the story. Onto Yasuke's Kanebo. And what the Kanebo is, it's basically a big mallet with studs. So not only is it really heavy, it also causes bleed damage, which is not very nice for the enemy, but they had it coming. It's Yasuke's most powerful weapon, but it's also the slowest, so keep that in mind when you use the Kanebo. And apologies, I wasn't able to actually capture any gameplay of this in action, so apologies for that. As ever, I recommend first grabbing the Kanebo Mastery because this increases all Kanebo damage by 3%, then on other levels on the next rank you get 7% and so on. First ability for the Kanebo, Crushing Shockwave, a downward strike that deals 90% ability damage, disables the targets and staggers all enemies in a 3 meter radius. You don't even need to hit the target to do damage to them, they're actually getting damage just being near the impact radius of your strike. Forward Momentum. When you hit an enemy, press R1 or R2 to chain your next attack faster. Irresistible Force. Increase Spine Breaker knockdown duration by 10 seconds. They are on the floor for ages, and 10 seconds in a fight is a long time. Turmoil is a passive with the Kanebo. Devastation combo enders generate 50% of an adrenaline chunk on hit. So once again, another adrenaline generating move. Slugging Rampage. A series of spinning strikes that deal 20% ability damage and send everyone nearby flying backwards. Really wish I actually bought this move. I didn't buy it. I didn't have any mastery points left, but this sounds amazing. The first thing I'm going to do when I get this game in my hands is get into a big group fight and unleash Slugging Rampage. I want to send all the enemies flying. Onto Yasuke's Teppo now. The Teppo is a completely different weapon to all the others because where the others are melee weapons, this one is a gun. It's a 16th century firearm that has a really lengthy reload, as you would imagine from firearms at the time, but it's really useful if an enemy is in the distance, for instance an archer, someone with a bow, and you want to take them out. Now, when I first used the gun in this game, it did 0 damage, like headshots would not take them down, and it literally took about 10 shots to actually eliminate enemies, which is why the first thing I'm going to do is increase the damage of the Teppo with the Teppo Mastery skill. So you can increase it by 3% on the first level, which isn't much, but the next rank increases it by 7%, and I'm going to go all the way to the top with this because I want my firearm to be useful, and I feel like it's only going to be useful when you increase it to the maximum. And I get why the Teppo doesn't feel that strong in the early game, because it is a gun and everyone else has swords, so they don't want to make you too overpowered, so you do have to work to get this weapon up to speed. Armor Buster is the first ability for Yasuke's Teppo. This sees you reload the Teppo and follow up with a shot that deals 100% ability damage and breaks the target's armor. So the first shot is a standard shot, but the second shot is when you reload probably some kind of special bullet into the gun and deal 100% damage. So you are doubling your damage with the next shot. You're also breaking their armor, which means the next shot after that will deal more damage than the first shot. Steel bullets. This is a passive. You unlock a new bullet type that makes the target vulnerable. Press the D-pad left while aiming to select them. I'm pretty sure for this you have to go to a vendor and stock up your steel bullets, so don't use them all at once, but when you run dry, go to a vendor and you actually have to buy more bullets. Here we have Yasuke's Samurai skill tree. Samurai isn't a specific weapon, it's more a style of fighting unique to Yasuke. As always, we'll open with Samurai Mastery. This increases your health by 8%. The next rank health increases by 12%. So if you find you're getting taken out regularly, there's always the Samurai Mastery you can rank up. My favorite move in the Samurai Mastery skill tree is the kick. It's not called the Spartan kick here for obvious reasons, but this is totally out of the movie 300 and also from previous Assassin's Creed games like Assassin's Creed Origins and Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And it just sees you boot an opponent in the stomach and send them flying. I haven't seen an enemy fly this far in any Assassin's Creed game before it. Ubisoft really upped the distance on the kick. No lie, this made me laugh out loud when I did this for the first time. I kicked a guy right off a ledge and he went flying into the forest, never to be seen again. Anyway, those were the skill trees for both Yasuke and Naoe in Assassin's Creed Shadows. I cannot wait to get my hands on this game and, see what skills work with each other, which skills harmonize well, and become a fighting machine. Anyway, let me know in the comments if any skills stood out to you and what skills you are personally itching to try. Assassin's Creed Shadows comes out March 20th on all platforms and I will be covering it in depth, so subscribe to the channel for all the latest Assassin's Creed Shadows guides. Drop a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and I will see you in the next one.